Hi, I'm Jessica Lindsey, and I'm a part of the Spatial Forces duo. I live here in Charlotte, North Carolina, and
I'm Christy Banks. I am the other part of the Spatial Forces duo, and I currently live in the Lancaster, Pennsylvania area. We're best friends. If that helps you in your compositional process, we're best friends. And we met in Nebraska when we were doing our graduate work. So interesting to kind of put in the back of your mind that we studied with the same teacher, which also will factor into some of that our sound concepts are very similar. But we were in Lincoln, Nebraska, and we were both affiliated with a new music ensemble of mixed instrumentation called the New Music Agency.
and I remember actually we were talking about we were driving through some cornfields in Nebraska,
Imagine.
and we were talking about what the future would kind of hold for us as two people performing and what might come up. And I think we both kind of came up with it at the same time. Like, well, okay, well, so we're part of the new music agency. Maybe the new music agency needs some special forces. And so we came up with the name Spatial Forces, obviously, as I just explained.
And then, so we're spatial agents. And then we were going on our first tour. And part of, the inception, I think, was that we wanted to travel together, perform together, and not necessarily need a piano or we wanted to be able to perform in flexible spaces, maybe spaces that aren't necessarily thought of as traditional concert spaces. So we were going on this tour, and I'm sure it was Jessica that came up with the idea that since we're spatial forces, that we should go on the
Code Read Tour!
code read. We are clarinetists, and we both play quite a bit of bass clarinet. So we commission works and play works that highlight both of those. So when you're thinking about your sound palette, B flat clarinet and bass clarinet that goes down to low C. So a written low C for us is sounds like B flat 2 octaves lower than middle C on the piano.
We're really comfortable playing in any combination. So if you'd like us to both play bass clarinet, you'd like one of us to play B flat and the other to play bass, you don't have to say, oh, Jessica is the bass clarinet player, so have her do it.
And we've played pieces where we're both playing both instruments in the same piece. So if you write an instrument change for us, just remember that in live performance, that does involve a little bit of choreography. So give us time to make that instrument change. But we're fine with that. We don't have to set us on one instrument and keep us there the entire time.
You're not your grandma's clarinet duet. Uh, we wanted to really have something where we could go to spaces and we could have a sound bed that was bigger than our two sounds. And so that was part of our interest in our ensemble and why we primarily work with electronics. So we are pretty comfortable with all the ways that you might want to stretch that fixed media. We are often playing with a click in our ear, and we run our shows through Logic, so we'd prefer AIFF files or MP3 files. We'd like that click track to be separate from the sound file that you send us. The sound, I'll basically give us a monitor in ear with your sound bed as well as the separate click track over that. And we would prefer loops for our click track. And we'd also prefer to have a high pitch for downbeats and a lower pitch for the other beats in the measure. So even if you're in mixed meter, giving us that change, especially if you're in mixed meter. But that'll be important.
Yeah, and especially because when it gets really busy, we want to be able to distinguish that click. And so using something like a cymbal is a little bit too washy. So we really do want like a boop, boop, boop kind of sound. So speaking of click tracks, do we have to have a click, Jess?
Well, No, but it's highly preferable. And as we talk about click tracks and the fixed media, I want to make it clear that we'd like to encourage you to explore the limits of what fixed media could be. So um, it's definitely fine for there to be parts that are free that don't have a click track. We'll just need to know then like how many measures you're going to give us before we need to come back in and be with the click. And like we've said before already, we'll have an in-ear monitor, so it there's a lot of we can hear a fair amount of detail and play along with the sound bed that you've created. But usually having a click is very helpful.
And sometimes we even have click tracks where somebody is speaking, like shouting out letter names or giving us an idea of how many more seconds to go before the click might come in if it's a very free section. So feel free to add to the click track things that you think might be really instructive.
Yeah, in fact, perhaps maybe the voiceover, if you do a voiceover in your click track where you're getting us 2, 3 letter A now or something of that variety, it should be pretty clear, and maybe actually send that as a separate MP3 so that I can line that up really specifically and just make sure that the balance is really what we want it to be in our ears.
Mm-hmm. And you just kind of demonstrated what we need is at least a 2-bar intro to line us up before anything that we'd need to be syncing with a click. So we request a 2-bar intro. And you can give us longer, just specify, but a minimum of 2-bar intro. And as far as the electronic parts that you might create for us, remember that we don't want to be karaoke. So please don't use like MIDI clarinet sounds in the part unless that's really your artistic vision. It's tricky for us to blend if what you're trying to accomplish is to trick the audience into thinking that we've triggered a sound that is continuing in the fixed media. It's tricky for us to really sound like a MIDI clarinet. All right, so to review, Jessica, when they send you a click, what do they need to know?
Y'all need to know that it should be 2 measures intro before our entrance. The click should have a higher pitch on the downbeat and a lower pitch on subsequent beats. And we prefer for it to be some kind of electronic loop. Please, please, no cowbell, no snare drum, no cymbals. Preferable maybe that you make it outside of finale even. It'd be the best for you to send the click as a separate track. MP3 is fine for the click. Send AIF files if you want a higher quality file for the sound bed. That's fine as well. If you do a voiceover, I think I'd like that as a separate track as well.
Perfect. So some other things, especially when I tell people I play the bass clarinet, they get very excited that they're just going to write me a piece that's 100% slap tongue. And I'm really working on slap tongue, but I'm not consistent with slap tongue. So I think if you, for best results, you should not write slap tongue or not be very married to the idea that the slap tongue sound that you have in your head is exactly what is going to be produced by us.
By either of us. Let's just make that clear.
So that's one thing, slap tongue. I also can't imagine a world where I will ever be able to circular breathe. So I think we should have a little conversation about multiphonics. One thing to know, especially if you're not a clarinetist, is that there are lots of resources out there that might give you a bit of a false impression that this fingering always produces this exact multiphonic at this exact dynamic. And even on my various instruments, like my instrument that I play on in performance versus my spare, like the response of multiphonics is different with the same mouthpiece and the same reed. So those can be maybe some guides for you, but as far as what might really come out of our instruments and what I might get with the same fingering might be a different sound than Jessica gets with the same fingering. So when I've worked with composers with multiphonics, there are two things that I ask them when they present me with multiphonics, especially if they've written out some fingerings that they want me to try. Um, the first thing I want to know, or that is helpful to me, is, are you married to those pitches that you've written in the multiphonic? Is there a reason that those specific pitches are there? Or did you find the sound and that happened to be, like, you kind of liked the grittiness of the sound and that happened to be the pitches? Because if the multiphonic has specific pitches that you really, really want, I might have to kind of experiment on my instrument to find a fingering that gets those pitches or the majority of those pitches that you want. So the first thing is, how important to your sound environment are those specific pitches? The second question I always have for composers is, can you describe the sound that you want from that multiphonic? So do you want shimmery? And do you want it to be something that will speak immediately soft? Do you want something that's like really rude? Do you want something that is going to be like almost a growly sound and super loud? Those kinds of, ethereal, those kinds of descriptors really help me, because then I know, okay, what's most important is they want a shimmery sound here, and if these pitches could come out, that would be great. If I know that, that helps me to solutionize and figure out if what fingerings might work for me to help produce those goals for you. Jessica, what do you think about multiphonics?
Multiphonics worked for me. Um, I think it's a really fun tool, and certainly the things that we're saying are not to discourage you from using multiphonics, but just to have a conversation with us. Um, I think it's important to understand that just because what you read on a resource, maybe on the internet or even in a printed book, like some of the wonderful guides that are out there, it just might not be true, as Christy's already said. So I guess one thing that I just want to say, have a conversation with us. And it's just frustrating to us if you tell us that it should work, but we're the people, boots on the ground, working on it, and it's not coming through. And I guarantee that both of us have played enough music so that it's not that, we're not able to. And it might have worked for, the other clarinet duo that you're working with, but it's just not working for us.
Yeah. And it may even on different days. I mean, so the more we understand why you wrote the multiphonic and what you want out of it, what its purpose is right there, the easier it is for us to work with you, to collaborate with you, to figure out exactly how we're going to play it. And another thing about the should is, I've worked with composers who really feel like if Jessica's playing a multiphonic that has 3 pitches and I'm playing a different multiphonic that has 3 different pitches, that magically those played simultaneously will produce 6 different pitches. And that is not always the case. That just physics wise, those 2 sounds in the same air vibrating in live performance can cancel each other out. All kinds of wonky things can happen when I'm trying to play multiphonics right next to somebody else playing multiphonics. So you might want to keep that in mind, that there's some very weird things that can happen when you try to put 2 people playing multiphonics next to each other.
And if that's what you're going for, that's great. If that's some weird effect where we're both playing and there's no sound,
it keeps like going, yeah. If you like that donkey sound, then please write donkey like. I think that will be very helpful for us. My very favorite pet peeve. Okay.
Christy's favorite key is
My
not D
favorite
major.
thing is
It's
to get
not D major.
is to get music for me that has 2 sharps in the key signature. I love that. I love that so much, especially when the music is atonal. So here's why that happens. A lot of composers choose to compose, I guess, in concert pitch, and then they have finale automatically transpose, or they immediately open a finale file and say that they're writing for B flat clarinet, and finale does this automatic thing where it gives two sharps because that is our transposition. But really, I only want to see two sharps in the key signature if you're really writing in a key and that key requires those two sharps. Um, I am always receptive to, especially if you're not going to use bar lines or something like that, to tell me how long those accidentals last. Feel free. I'm not insulted if you say the accidentals only last for that note or the accidentals carry through. And also to tell me things like the accidental, to specify that the accidentals don't carry up the octave or do carry up the octave. Usually that's only going to happen if you're writing something really tonal anyway, that it would carry up the octave. But those kinds of it's not insulting for you to write specific little instructions at the beginning of the score saying what you mean with your accidentals, how long they last, that kind of stuff.
The more information we have from you about how you want us to play your music, the more we can continue the conversation and the easier we can put your piece together. So I think that's definitely the gist of what we're saying today. Funk, rock,
Polka.
in hip hop, in electronica.
Middle school band. One of my favorite memories of one of our performances is the thing we did for school children in Charlotte. And one of the electronic parts was had sampled people at a basket or a baseball game, right? And somebody who is selling water, and so there was this sound bite of "water, water, water," and like the kids were, giving us high fives on the way out, going "water, water, water."
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I wonder if they were walking out of that thinking, I just sat through a classical recital.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, I think that's, yeah, that kind of sums it up as that, intersection between what's on the electronic track and what can that be that is so relatable and so normal and so everyday, and how does that intersect with art, I guess, to put it.
Yeah. I think intersection too is a neat word because part of what we seem drawn to also sonically are things where there's so much intersection that the audience is maybe confused. Like I love it. Like I mentioned earlier that since we have similar teacher or the same teacher and similar sound concept that we can do that trick where you're not sure which one of us just played the thing. Um, and depending on what's on the fixed media, we can really like that's kind of part of our name, right? Spatial. Like we had pieces where the the fixed media spread out, whether it's in stereo or whether we actually did the old boombox trick or whatever, so that it was maybe a different experience based on where you were sitting in the space, um, and that kind of playing with what's live, what is possible. Can the clarinet really make that backwards sound? Wow, how did that happen? That's a different intersection, but I think that's one of the things that we can do that I don't know that can be replicated without human beings, um, but certainly can't just be two acoustic human beings. That's kind of the part that I dig about combining it and combining it in this space.
Ants, like roasted ants, and I don't even think they were chocolate covered. And I totally ate one.
Snake spleen. It was amazingly awful. It was terrible, but it
Oh,
was the most adventurous thing I've ever put in
yeah,
my body
yeah.
intentionally. We're really excited to see what you send us, and then to also work with you. The collaboration part is, I think, the really fun part for me. Um, to kind of work with the composer to see their work come to fruition. So
Absolutely. Yeah, it's going to be a blast to get your music and see it come off, see and hear it come off the page and put it all together. And we're really excited about this opportunity. So thanks for writing for us.
happy writing.
All right, bye.
Bye.
Like, okay, I'm gonna get the sound out there.